On a usual day off, my day starts with waking up at around 10:30. I head downstairs, make some coffee, eat a couple eggs, and say hello to my dog. I then head back upstairs and go to my PC. I've had it since 2020. The specs are dated, but it's still powerful enough for what I want it to do. I turn it on, sit down, look at the 4 instances of command prompt opening on startup in rapid succession, and then I look away. Because if I can't see it, then it's not an issue. After an hour or two, I hop on the bus and head to the gym, not because I want to, but because I can't afford a car of my own. It's cheap, it's affordable, and it gets me most of the places I need to be. It's getting warmer. It seems countries are breaking temperature records by the
Climate
year.
Central says the past 4 years have been the warmest in the United States since record-keeping began
They say
in
that a little
1895.
goes a long way, that if everyone helps chip in and does their part, it'll make a difference. On the flip side, some people are saying that it's not our fault, that we should target those who started the problem and those who contribute to it most.
Fossil fuel and industry with the largest carbon footprint.
We're in the midst of a crisis, and much like the viruses that riddle the very computer I'm editing this video on, it's invisible, immaterial, and a Byrne that slowly, painfully pushes us over the brink 1 degree at a time.
It's grim, with a glimmer of hope and a call to action.
Limit climate change in stone with the current programme the government has. Net zero will not happen. That is true.
Scientists say time is running out to limit.
Our world needs climate action on all fronts, everything, everywhere, all at once.
Not just the extreme weather events, the retreat of glaciers and mass extinctions of species.
This is what the future could look like, depending on how much greenhouse gas emissions are cut.
A major UN report describes a litany of inadequate measures and broken government promises.
The lights are flashing red on the climate dashboard.
We haven't got any time to wait. You know, this is very serious. It's no longer possible to ignore the fact that we will make this planet uninhabitable if we don't act now.
It's the 70s. James Black has just been hired by ExxonMobil to be the senior scientist in charge of what would become some of the greatest climate research ever conducted under a corporate entity, with lobbyists and scientists like Arthur Randall and Haroon Keshki soon to follow in later years. The fallout that has followed their research spanned all the way from their original discoveries to the current day, lobbying and selling lies, doubt, and uncertainty. It is one of the first major cases of a now classified polluter making an effective strategy sending us into regression out of scientific progression, and they were so good at it, it didn't take others long to notice. You see, it's at this point where the conversation shifts. It's no longer about science or statistics, it's not even about fact. It's now about culture, belief, and championship. It's no longer about truth, denial, or accountability, it's about deflection, doubt, and skepticism. Build yourself up. Position yourself as part of the solution, not the problem. Show the world what it would be like without you in the current day. These are no longer corporations. They are vital pieces of societal infrastructure who are some of the largest culture factories ever created. Eventually, once the dust is all settled, a large enough portion of people have realized climate change is an issue. They've mobilized, looked at the science, and research is being backed at an alarmingly fast pace. New evidence is surfacing of your scandal, and people are looking to make a difference. But it doesn't matter, because you've changed the game yet again. It's too late. You don't need to do anything. On one hand, a lot of people that hate living with you cannot live without you. And on the other hand, some people now view you as an innocent entity that enables their lifestyle. It is through these processes, and also the realizations begin to spread, that you as a company don't give a single fuck about the consumer, that you have another genius idea. You begin to silently play both sides. Confronting society, it's no longer about what can we do, it's about what can you do. And besides, you're okay with the criticism, the hate, the protests. It doesn't matter, because at the end of the day, no matter who you are or where you are, pollution, intended or not, is profitable. Actually, it's extremely profitable. Generally speaking, by asking the individual the ways in which they can help the now established climate crisis, a couple of things begin to transpire. The first major shift comes in the form of blame, who's pointing fingers at who and why. Individuals no longer point fingers at corporations, they point fingers at each other, or even themselves. Another shift is that people begin to realize their stance on an issue. They get informed, engaged, and come up with their own ways of combating climate change. Of course, there are some cases on this engagement spectrum where people may not be as motivated as others, but the interest in the subject of climate change ultimately rises, and with it, so does publicity and activism. However, a mixture of infighting or unclear goals within climate change groups, as well as fossil fuel companies providing organizational resources to politically inclined climate denial or opposition groups, it becomes hard to see people getting anywhere. On top of this, individual changes are easier said than done. We as a people and as a society are addicted to routine, ritual, and habit. And this kind of individualistic approach to solving the climate crisis does not account for any of these factors, on top of several others including regular economic and socioeconomic status, as well as general accessibility issues. These are extremely simple things that we've not only been participating in, but also observing our entire lives, which means these are things that are extremely hard to break and hard to change. These things may seem mundane, like driving to work or throwing your empty pop can in the nearest trash can, but that's why they're the worst when it comes to changing habits, because you don't think about doing it, you just do. Just as a little side note of mine, to add on to this, there have been so many of these suggestions that I feel like to the individual, no matter how engaged, they can feel overwhelming, pointless, or just the newest next best thing. In a very similar fashion to trends and social movements, these suggestions come and go, and it can be hard for the individual to figure out what exactly is going to stick. Additionally, if they do partake in a trend, once the bandwagon ends, it's just as easy to get off it as it was to get on, and can be difficult to stay on course when everyone else seems to be ditching their beliefs. What I'm trying to get at here is it's easy, albeit time-consuming, for the individual to stay educated on climate change. But it is seemingly extremely difficult for the individual to make educated decisions. Metrics of success and effectiveness on things that have been suggested for ages are hard to find, and even harder to compare when looking at the grand scheme of things if you're not super data literate. Besides, that ever so pesky issue of accessibility comes into play once again. Taking transit seems like an easy thing to do, but if your public transit system lacks funding or just straight up sucks, it's hard for someone to justify making the switch from their gas car to make the world a better place, while their life now gets consistently worse. These issues come and go, and affect certain strategies more than others, but the social factors present within individualistic practices are usually the driving force behind why we do what we do. We like what we like. Committing to a sacrifice of personal ritual with the trade-off of quote-unquote helping the globe is an uphill battle in every sense, especially considering the almost total lack of gratification from this sacrifice. Again, it's now a battle of culture, both societal and systemic, but there is one practice, both individual and social, that I think without a shadow of a doubt takes the cake for being the most interesting of the bunch in this analytic context. And in my personal opinion, it's not even close. We're going back in time again. It's now 1944. Donald and Dorothy Watson have been living a green lifestyle for as long as they can remember. During the year, they coined the term veganism and founded the Vegan Society in England, although the practice has existed long before this time. Vegetarianism and veganism are very similar in concept, but have a large amount of distinct definitional and cultural differences. The most prominent dividing factor being that one allows animal products, such as eggs or cheese, and the other calling for the removal of these animal products entirely. People choose either option for a variety of reasons, both moral or dietary, with other versions of the practice such as pescatarianism making its way into the mainstream. As a recent development, one of the individual practices marketed and classified as green or eco-friendly was partaking in vegan or vegetarian diets. The environmental impacts that processing meat and meat products have on the environment are quite substantial, and while not all vegan or vegetarian products are by definition eco-friendly, they are still more sustainable, and by and large have a lesser environmental impact by an insanely good margin. After all, these aren't livestock, these are plants, and their needs are a lot different than animals. So, vegetarianism has been around forever, practiced forever, and contains the support of a huge amount of animal rights groups, climate change groups, and individual activists, as well as those who just simply want to improve their health in their own way. So why hasn't more of the world made the switch? Ritual is something that holds extreme semiotic weight within shared cultures. Food, and more importantly, the act of eating as a ritual, in my opinion, holds a huge amount of social and cultural weight. When you go on a date, where do you go? What do you do? I'd be willing to bet at some point food gets brought into the mix. You have family dinners, business meetings, over lunch. You have special meals like cake to celebrate an occasion or milestone. Everyone needs to eat. Everyone seems to want to eat something good, and there's always going to be something that you like. And just as I discussed before, habits and therefore rituals are hard to break. And when you're challenged, you're going to be faced with resistance, especially in the case of dietary options. For a lot of people, food is a pleasure. It's a habit and a ritual that brings people together, sparks joy, and creates satisfaction. The interesting case with veganism and vegan food options are the cultural weights that they have. And I think that the perfect way to examine them and to understand the comparison of veganism is to first talk about the specific cultural foothold that the very thing veganism excludes holds on society. In my perspective, if food is a cultural being, then meat is the heart of that being. The central meat or protein is the structural glue that usually brings a meal together. It is the centerpiece and usual main component of a dish. Everything else is literally a side or side dish. Cultures and traditions are formed around meat. Thanksgiving turkey in the United States, Christmas roast, Korean barbecue, I could go on. It's also the central component of some religions, with certain faiths such as Islam or Hinduism choosing not to eat pork or beef respectively. Meat is a cornerstone of feast, wealth, and historically has symbolized health, strength, and fortune. With that in mind, it's not hard to see why these assumptions and associations in regard to meat are extremely present today, with a new narrative undertone thrown into the mix. Just as people crave food as ritual, they crave storytelling as one as well. It has been proven time and time again that we love a good story. We love them so much, in fact, that a lot of the times we don't necessarily realize that we're being fed one. We love ideas of protagonists, antagonists, and a narrative arc that inspires an emotional response. Narrative structure within the media is so good at keeping our attention that I feel like I would struggle to find an outlet that doesn't utilize it in some way. It doesn't matter what, where, or who you're watching from, one way or another there is an agenda, and there is a narrative feeling being pushed. Bringing this back to the topic of food, meat within social media, news media, as well as pop culture has similarly been presented as a modern consumable symbol of umbrella-like power.
Hi, I'm Buddy. What can I get you?
Let's see, steak. Oh, yeah, there's Douglas Sirk steaks. Have that.
How do you want that cooked? Burnt to a crisp or bloody as hell?
Bloody as hell, and oh yeah, look at this, vanilla Coke.
This is a narrative. It's also one that places preconceptions about a concept or thing in our minds. And in this case, it's the concept of meat being a symbol of status. When you think of meat and the different assumptions that go along with it, what do you think about? Personally, I think of barbecue. I think of burgers, hot dogs, and chicken. I also think of fancy, fatty, juicy steaks eaten in dark restaurants on spotless cutting boards.
Duck fat makes all the difference.
Additionally, I think of the people that go along with eating meat. Celebrities like Joe Rogan talking about eating bear, or fitfluencers on Instagram screaming at me to get my protein in. With these associations of wealth, power, and influence, there is a traditionally masculine feeling that comes along with it. And well, yes, I will right here and now acknowledge that this is a super Western perspective and association that I'm making. I'll also take the time to mention that the US has one of the highest meat consumption rates in the world, completely dwarfing the vast majority of other countries. Western perceptions of meat and food are also the ones that I find the most predominant within media. While this may be a colonial or nationalist product, these foods are simplistic, recognizable, and carry or present the same assumptive properties as before. Even mentioning certain exotic animal products such as caviar, expensive seafood, or Wagyu beef can create that same feeling of status and power as before. Conversely, if meat is the primary thing that gives certain Western or luxurious foods its primary symbolic status, then vegan or vegetarian options give off these assumptions of weakness, femininity, and sacrifice. When you go on a site such as YouTube, for example, you can see an insanely large amount of videos of quote-unquote vegan gets absolutely destroyed by facts and logic, or entitled vegan gets what they deserve. In an extremely similar fashion to how you'd see a video such as Woke Feminist owned at political debate or Ben Shapiro dominating dumb college students. These videos exist for a reason, and they reflect that not all, but a large enough portion of people have this undescriptive and largely stereotypical tie of veganism to things like feminism, wokeness, entitlement, and so on and so forth. While I don't believe that I will ever, in any sense, understand this perspective on the subject of veganism or feminism, I will say that once you have this perspective, these videos do not help the standing fact that it will take a monumental amount of effort to change someone's mind on the subject. I want to back this up that the extremely common gut reaction when talking about the switch to veganism or even vegetarianism isn't necessarily you're gaining the benefits of having a vegan or vegetarian diet. It's almost exclusively you're losing and or sacrificing the pleasure of eating meat. And it goes beyond that. These perceptions run deep within Western society. In the summer of 2022, MIT ran a study during a hosted dinner. Before the dinner started, they sent out a digital survey asking people what they would like for dinner. Both of these surveys had the exact same two options, but the first food item was simply labeled in parentheses as vegan. The good majority of people picked the quote-unquote non-vegan option, which for the record was still vegetarian, and opted for it instead. They then sent out another survey to a different group of attendees without the vegan designation for the first food option, and the exact opposite occurred, with the majority of attendees choosing the first option over the second. They repeated this experiment 2 times afterwards and got almost the exact same results. I think that this survey and quantitative data presented show a clear picture of what I'm getting at. In conclusion to the study, a good amount of articles were released, including some arguments by the researchers themselves that removing vegan labels off of some food products could actually benefit in terms of sales. This segues into my next point, that fake meat has now become the de facto quote-unquote face of veganism. It is the negative, unwarranted criticism of plant-based substitutes being unnatural or fake that have pushed them into the cultural hot seat of the culinary world. This idea that vegan products are the only things that are exclusively unnatural serves to perpetuate an idea based on hardly anything. The logic is flawed. Take a look at a couple of examples.
Inside Beyond Meat, it starts with water, pea protein, canola oil, refined coconut oil, rice protein, dried yeast, cocoa butter, methyl cellulose, which is a thickener and emulsifier, potato starch, apple extract, potassium chloride, salt, vinegar, concentrated lemon juice, beet juice extract, pomegranate extract, sunflower lecithin, and vitamins and minerals, most likely synthetic vitamins and minerals. Now this is beyond wonderful. Just one simple ingredient, ground beef, and it's wonderful for your health too. Now this, on the other hand, I don't know how beyond this is. Just look at the color.
I don't eat red meat, no fish, no seafood. I'm a plant-based eater. Everything's plant. I'll go chicken every once in a while. I stopped eating red meat so much because I learned that I didn't have to have it. I thought that I needed it to survive. Then I started to learn more about the plant-based food space. I was like, I'm gonna give it a try. And I started trying to Beyond Meat. I fucking fell in love with Beyond Meat. I was like, I don't feel the difference.
Just let me tell you something right now. Those Beyond Meat things are not good for you.
I love them.
I'm sure you do. It's not bad if you want just taste, but they're not good for you.
These videos are short, without citations, and neither Joe Rogan nor Joey Wellness have any sort of certifications of any kind. But there is something that Joey can help us with. If this is the reason why you're turned off of vegan alternatives, you almost 100% have eaten fast food before. And shocker, Joey, fast food does look disgusting and unhealthy when you break it down into its individual parts and then mix them into sludge. Who could have possibly foreseen this coming? This argument of vegan products being unnatural can extend to meat products as well as almost anything. Energy drinks, donuts, or even condiments. Veganism is not exclusive to this club, and yet culturally it's treated like the worst option. This kind of reaction will perpetuate the publicity of these products, but ultimately will serve to negatively impact them. I believe in this case one of the main primary issues in this is just that. The product is calling itself fake meat, or a meat substitute. While yes, there are many such cases in which this will help people who are looking for meat alternatives to try, changing the label will help to some extent. Additionally, it is this byproduct of the advertising that has an unfortunate impact on the cultural perceptions it's trying to break. It is attempting to mimic something that has already been established in social settings as the clear best choice. You're now openly committing yourself to being second-rate, second-best, or the clear worse alternative. Meat processing and farming production make up for about 14.5% of total carbon emissions worldwide. Scientists estimate that plant-based alternatives would cut up to 90% of these emissions based on statistics alone. Additionally, they take up less physical land and require less resources to cultivate. Not to mention, the practice of growing plants needed for these products is completely self-sustainable and eco-friendly. The perception of veganism needs to shift from imitation to a unique perspective that reestablishes itself within cultural relevancy. Additionally, there are a lot of common perceptions about vegan and vegetarian foods or alternatives that may serve as misrepresenting it or limiting the industry, that I would like to discuss in relation to meat products. Accessibility, affordability, nutritional value, and vegan and vegetarian products being worse for the environment than meat is. Let's start in order. First, let's look at availability and accessibility. Sometimes, vegan or vegetarian products are hard to come by. They have little selection, or just don't fit the needs of the consumer. For example, they may have a substitute for beef, but not for chicken, etc. At my local supermarket and a few other stores that allowed for online shopping in my area, I managed to find a large variety of different substitutes for beef, chicken, pork, as well as pre-made household meats like burger patties, sausages, and chicken strips. Other options included vegan dressings, mayonnaise, cheese, and milk alternatives. But to test this even further, I went to one of the more remote towns in the province where I live, British Columbia, called Fort Nelson, which is a small community in the far north hosting just over 3,000 residents in the local area both in and outside of town. And I continued my shopping escapade at the local Fort Nelson grocery store. And wouldn't you know it, almost an entire webpage's worth of vegan meat substitutes from a variety of providers staring me in the face. Albeit lacking the spread variety, but still with a more than sizable amount of options. Another very popular argument is that these substitutes aren't affordable to the everyday person. So, continuing on with our shopping spree, let's compare some prices, shall we? These are current day prices, all from that same remote Fort Nelson grocery store, listed in Canadian dollars. Lean ground beef is going anywhere from between $176 to $187 per 100 grams, whereas the veggie ground substitute is only going for $191 per gram. Some plant-based Italian sausages are going for $2.44 per 100 grams, whereas the meat counterparts are $1.76 per 100 gram. This may look like a decent price increase, but simple math tells me that it's a difference of 68 cents CAD. The problem now arrives when you attempt to scale up this number. The cost difference is negligible at a smaller scale, but looking at the numbers on the packages, we can see that these sausages are at a 500 gram package versus a 368 gram package. The costs of these products alone side by side is close to the exact same, but the amount of food you get is very different. Upon my further comparisons, this became increasingly more and more obvious when it came to pre-packaged or pre-cooked foods, whereas things like burger patties or beef mince were extremely similar in price. This is an issue of scale. These substitutes are just large enough to sell in the stores, but still at that point of being a somewhat niche product that hasn't reached the same kind of relevance and output that meat has due to some of the reasons I've already suggested. And in my opinion, probably never will. In other words, there's no guarantees that these products are going to be smash hits, and sales and subsequently company profit margins for both the store and the supplier will move slower because of it. Next up on the list is nutritional value. Full disclaimer, I am not a nutritionist, but I can still find out what certain ingredients are. As I discussed earlier, there's a narrative being pushed by social media health gurus and people without any formal credibility that vegan substitutes aren't natural or good for you in any way. But an extremely large portion of the amount of actual synthesized products within plant-based products are, from plants, the things that are green and grow in the ground. Plant-based alternatives have extremely similar nutrition facts on the label, with slightly less protein and fats. Additionally, they have zero cholesterol, which can cause health issues such as blood clots, heart disease, and risk of heart attack. They also have a much lower level of saturated fats. There is also this associative perception between meat and protein. While this is true, meat is an excellent source of protein, it does not devalue the plant-based proteins such as pea protein or rice proteins, as media or gurus would suggest. Processed foods are everywhere, and if you rule out vegan alternatives exclusively based upon this, especially in the realm of protein intake, I would suggest looking at how largely accepted whey protein powders and supplements are made. Yet again, these are two things that are indeed highly processed, but one is accepted and the other is not. The one thing veggie patties or minces don't have going for them is the level of sodium, which can be quite high. However, the Beyond Meat patty contains 310 to 390 milligrams of sodium, with the total recommended amount of sodium per day for an adult being around 1,500 milligrams. Still well under the mark for a balanced diet, but not the best for a relative single serving. Finally, there's been a perception of these products being just as polluting as meat is. Videos such as this one from Piers Morgan suggest they are harmful.
You're a vegan, right? I'm a meat eater. Why can't we just both live happily in each other's orbit? Why can't you let me just get on with eating meat, and you eat your gruel, and we'll all go home happy? You can all be as hangry as you like and not have meat. I don't believe in the science of a strictly vegan diet. If vegan diets work, a lot of animals wouldn't eat other animals.
Do you believe in the climate crisis?
Yes.
Well, animal agriculture, farming and fishing is a leading cause of the climate crisis.
You know what's also a leading cause of climate crisis? Planes which carry vast amounts of your avocados and your almonds from California and fly them thousands of miles to your table here in your vegan cafes. And then they also go in trucks. And that is an environmental hazard too. So you're not only are you killing billions of bees, you're destroying the planet. And yet you have the brass neck to sit here in between munching your almonds and your avocados and start preaching to me about how virtuous you are about not killing animals.
This video has 51 million views. Newsflash, Mr. Morgan. Other people that are not vegan also eat avocados, you fucking moron. Also, you're deflecting her comment about the meat industry. Last I checked, they also use trucks. You're just saying this to get a ruse out of people. The clip is shortened and taken out of context. They add some sad music to make it look like Piers is the one being victimized, and then begins to spread like wildfire. While this may not be a common sentiment, it surely is one that people will eat up. Additionally, it furthers the narrative present against vegetarianism and veganism. Ironically, one of the things that this clip shows us is one of the things I would like to mention as I begin to conclude this essay. Ironically, it seems that the cultural and social projection of veganism and vegetarianism has shifted away from vegetables. Coming full circle, companies and polluters benefit enormously from everything I've talked about, including this. It keeps people eating meat, and it keeps people buying their products close to 100% of the time. And more importantly, it keeps the perception of vegan and vegetarian options negative while demonizing vegans and vegetarians who utilize them for one reason or another. These narratives, discourses, and paradigms also shift the topic from the other benefits vegan or vegetarian options have to a conversation and narrative that exclusively shows what it is at face value, ultimately devaluing the final product. There is not a lot of mention about the monumental positive impacts it could have on climate change. And there is certainly not a lot of mention on the negative impacts that animal products have on climate change. And while I'm not going to look far into it for the sake of this video, I'm almost positive that there are a gross amount of other representations of climate solutions that have been completely misrepresented or defamed by the same narratives that plague veganism today. So if there's one thing you should take away from this essay, my research, or the commentary from the clips provided, is that you should think critically when it comes to climate solutions. Understand who is marketing their media to you, ask yourself if there are any external themes present within the media, or search to try to find an alternate opinion. When looking at climate change, the sum total of its causes, those responsible for it, and the possibilities for solutions, it doesn't take a genius to see that going full vegan isn't going to work. Meat and animal products will never fully cease to be consumed under any kind of circumstances, but that's not what anyone's asking. If you're worried about the climate crisis and global warming in general, there are ways to help. In my eyes, corporations have treated and assumed the consumer to be blind for centuries. With all of these negative associations with veganism, vegan products, and vegans themselves, it turns the consumer off of the idea of going vegan. You do not want to become what you dislike, but you don't necessarily need to. Replacing even just one meal a day with a vegan alternative, or simply eating a meal with less of a focus on protein from animal products, will have huge benefits to not only your health, but the environment as well. Compromise is the name of the game, and the beauty of food is that you can have the best of both worlds. Sometimes it's not necessarily about doing more for the climate crisis, it's ironically about doing less. Eating less meat and consuming less animal products will help sustainable farming practices flourish. Being aware of what you eat and the effects it has on the environment is the first step to solving the problem, or attempting to, at least. If your body is your temple, then what is the earth itself to your body? Eating a veggie patty every now and then isn't going to indoctrinate or kill you, and neither is eating a salad.